Okay, welcome everyone to this Saturday morning Misophonia question and answer session. I'm Tom Dozier. I am a behavior scientist and I am the president of Misophonia Institute. And I've been working on misophonia 1 week short of 13 years. I was first introduced to misophonia in 2012 on August the 31st. I'm a behavioral parenting coach, and a mom with this child with misophonia said, I've got this, my daughter has this incurable hearing disorder. It's going to ruin her for life, and there's no cure. And I thought, wow, that's really strange. But she had auditory, visual, and odor, olfactory triggers. So if she's getting triggers out of three sensory domains, that can't just be a hearing defect, right? She's getting it through her eyes and her nose. That has to be a reflex condition of some kind. So anyway, that's what started me on my investigation of misophonia. And here I am right at 13 years later, and we're making some good progress. We're getting some things known. We're getting some research conducted this fall that's really should be very beneficial. And that's kind of my story. So this is for your questions and answers. Here's some possible suggestions, but anybody have a question to start us off?
Well, can you hear me?
I
Okay.
can hear you great, Julie.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm a parent of a daughter who has had misophonia for most of her life. We found it in 2002 when she was 4 and started having rages. And she's now 27. We've adapted, we don't use the letter P, we use the letter B. We don't eat together unless she has music on. But it's tough for her as she develops intimate relationships with other people because it was only the family.
Right.
So I guess I'm just here to gather some information. I mean, we didn't have a name at that point. It took a bunch of years to find the name. And I still, I'm here to kind of research to see if this is something I might recommend to her for when she's ready.
Okay.
And also see what I can do to, outside of the different coping mechanisms that we've found as a family. I'm
Okay.
just
Well,
not sure what to do as a parent. I guess that's a question.
sure. Well, as a parent, you're being kind, you're being caring, you're being understanding. That's your number one thing to do.
Thank you. Yeah.
However, is your daughter still living at home?
No, she isn't.
Okay.
She's not. But when
So
she comes home,
then,
we've
sure.
always done that.
Right. And so with misophonia, there's you can have over accommodations too much, but generally you want to try to have life to carry on and make accommodations for the individual and be kind. You don't want a person with misophonia to then dictate who is where in the house and you don't want to give them control over everything, but you want to give them control over themselves and what they need to be involved in and not involved in. Again, be kind and nice.
We
The
are that.
Good.
That's
So
nice.
that's one thing you can do. The other problem that you mentioned is that misophonia has spread to other people in other places where it used to just be family. That's very common with misophonia. That gives a person a lot more motivation to address their misophonia when it's affecting other areas of their life. If the family's very accommodating, a lot of teenagers, especially younger teenagers, it's okay as long as nobody makes these sounds. It's okay. So they're not motivated. So now they're more motivated. But the person needs to be motivated. So let me, while I'm trying to talk here, grab another slide in my little slide deck here.
Thank
if I
you.
can. And I'm going to just talk then a little bit about the misophonia treatment that I provide
Great.
and the research that's coming up on that. So when you consider misophonia, I have a little slide here that shows 3 different ways to look at misophonia. This is simplified. There's some more aspects here, but most people with misophonia feel like they hear the sound and they just feel rage. That'd be like
Yes.
this model A. And then, of course, once you have the rage, you're getting distressed and you have a lot of physical, yucky, horrible feelings that go along with it. Some people may feel like, well, I don't know. I know I feel that physical response, but I don't know if I think it comes like right with the emotions.
Yes.
Most people would go with A. What our research shows us is that you hear a trigger, see a trigger, and then there is a physical reflex in the body.
Right. Right. Right.
And this is a learned reflex, Pavlovian conditioning. And that triggers these intense motions and the physical responses and all the chaos that goes on with misophonia. If if a person has certain physical responses, if they have pain, they will typically identify that they have this instant pain. For they maybe 2% of the people, 1% of the people with misophonia that actually have a sexual response, they know they're feeling this disgusting sexual response. They'll identify that they have this physical response. Most everyone else will say no. And if they say, yeah, I think I have a physical response, and I'll ask them, what is it? They may say, well, I clench my fists. And then when we actually do the investigation of their physical response, it's not fist, it's not their fists. Maybe they're holding their breath or it's something else. That fist is an anger reaction. So this is the model that we've figured out is misophonia. All of the current research, almost all the current researchers are researching model A. Why do these seemingly innocent little sounds trigger such intensive negative emotions? So this is the model that I use when I talk to people, and I say that we can't just stop this reflex, but we know how to bring it down. And
Yeah.
as we
She
bring
gets
it
pain,
down, see
right
what?
there. She gets like a intense pain in her chest. So for her the sound goes right to the pain, and then the rage has always been there. She can modulate it a little bit now.
Okay, so that may have to do with her breathing muscles. That's the most common
Mm.
pain or sensation in the chest is a breathing muscles. The
Okay.
first person that I really uh, published anything about, like the second person I ever helped, had a breath reflex. And we determined what it was finally is that her windpipe would close and then she would try to breathe in very strongly. And if you just try to breathe in without breaking in air, just that jerk, you feel like you're getting poked right in the chest.
Yeah.
And that was her. She described it as feeling like a shovel was being run through her chest and out her back. That it was such a sharp, strong pain.
Right.
And that's really helped me understand this physical component.
Thank you.
So,
Yes.
so if we can take that, if we understand how these reflexes develop and how they decay, then we can apply that. So, for example, with a person who has a breath reflex, the the treatment is when there are little triggers occurring, you breathe in and you breathe out continually. So you're retraining your brain stem that says it's not supposed to stop me from breathing. You're supposed to just notice that I'm continuing to breathe. And that brain stem, that autonomic nervous system, which I like to jokingly call the lizard brain, it it watches for about 2 seconds after every trigger. And so in that 2 seconds, it's either learning I predicted correctly or I predicted incorrectly. Or maybe the timing was correct, but I need to hit it a little harder. And triggers typically increase with normal experience. So just normal exposure is not good for misophonia. It tends to increase the triggers. But you can do counter conditioning, which is physically doing the opposite of what the lizard brain is trying to do to you. So if you're being relaxed, and I know Dr. Mitchell plays catch with people with misophonia, so they're just throwing the baseball back and forth, and he's trying to keep them, you got to keep your eye on the ball. And he says, and if I notice they're starting to become a little focused on the trigger sounds that are playing, he says, I throw the ball so they have to jump for it. And that gets their mind into the physical activity and not on the trigger. For a breath reflex, it's slow, steady breathing when triggers are happening. For some other things, it's just relaxing specific muscles. And people with misophonia all want to tense up when they're triggered. But if you can relax before and through the trigger, that will get rid of or allow that reflex to decay and come down. So that's counter conditioning. Again, good management, because prolonged exposure to triggers just makes it worse. And then there's some other tricks. There's people with misophonia need to learn to focus on something other than the triggers. I worked with one family for quite a long time, actually, and we were having good progress, but this girl still was being triggered by her mother. And we figured out what she was doing is that she was coming into the room and she was watching her mother. And so we made the rule that when you're in the room with your mother, you only look at your mother if she's talking to you or you're talking to her. That's it. Otherwise, your job as a teenager is to ignore your mother. And so we started looking at how to do that. And the parents then could see if she was watching her mother or not, and could remind her. And she didn't want to track her mother. She just was, but it was the habit she had. And when she stopped tracking her mother, that was kind of the last major accomplishment.
Oh, that's great.
That her misophonia was very mild. Most people, their misophonia can go way down, but not go away. So that's kind of the treatment that I provide. And this basic theory of misophonia, this is in a journal article now, that's listed in PubMed, so it's out there for everyone to find. Recognizes that you have this anticipatory anxiety and avoidance. It's a big issue with misophonia. You have this trigger and the reflex, and then you have that reaction, these intense emotions. There's physiological distress. There's thoughts just being popped into the person's head, and they want to do something, and then they have what's called emotion-driven behavior. With some people, it's so bad they just run out of the room or stop, and that's because the emotions are so high, it kicks that off. Then after the trigger, people will often ruminate on the event, and that mental review prolongs the distress, and addressing the mental review then becomes a very important thing for the person to just carry on and do their best just to willfully ignore that there was a trigger, because right now they're going to be going to the kitchen to get something, and they just keep on going and they do what they need to do. So these are some other components, but the Misophonia Institute, thanks to funding that we receive from donations, is funding or supporting a research project at the University of North Texas this fall that will actually look at misophonia in this model and then say, how can we actually change these reflexes? Because if this reflex goes away, you're not being jabbed, and then you don't have a reason to be upset. And so things can all taper off and come down.
Wow.
Okay,
Thank
so that's an explanation
Appreciate
of a method of misophonia treatment. For anyone who happens to be in the Louisville, Kentucky area, Dr. Nate Mitchell is a fantastic psychologist and a great treatment provider, and he only works in person. So a great guy if you happen to be in the Louisville, Kentucky area. Okay, so anybody have questions or comments? Well, I'm just going to take another stab at something here and talk a little bit about something that's often confused with misophonia, and that is sensory overresponsiveness or sensory processing
4S.
disorder. Well, no. 4S is the same as misophonia.
Okay.
So, but sensory overresponsiveness is for a person who the sound of fireworks are too loud, and often clothes tags will bother them. It's especially common in younger children. It's often common with autism, and with this sensory sensitivity, the person can become very upset by different loud sounds or sticky surfaces or, again, clothes tags. But that's a genetic condition sensitivity, where misophonia is a learned or an acquired reflex condition. So if a person is generally sensitive and they've always been sensitive since a little child, to again, sticky surfaces, clothes tags, tight shoes or clothes, and loud sounds, that's a genetic condition called it used to be called sensory processing disorder in the books, but it is now not in the books anymore. It's taken out of the DSM, which is a psychological and psychiatric listing of conditions, because it's more genetic. It's just a genetic sensitivity. All right. Anybody going to have a question, or do you want me to pick another topic? Okay. So let me talk a little bit about the scientific research on brain imaging that explains misophonia. Anytime you have a correlation, you find these people have misophonia and they have this condition in their brain. What you don't know is whether the brain has caused misophonia, what you see in the brain has caused misophonia, or whether misophonia has developed this neurological situation in the brain.
What I wonder about somebody.
So let me stop sharing here for just a second and go find my little explanation on the emotions of misophonia. Misophonia emotions have the neurological component of misophonia emotions has been demonstrated, and this particular visual talks about the work that Sukhbinder Kumar and his colleagues did back in 2015, 2014 timeframe. Dr. Kumar presented at the Misophonia Association Convention in 2015, which I think was in Chicago area. And he did a remote presentation from the UK. And what their brain imaging shows that for people with misophonia, they have a lot of activity here in this kind of this area between the anterior insula, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. There's another structure I don't have shown here that's involved in that, and the amygdala and the hippocampus. And so they found several things. One is that the neurons in this area are highly myelinated, and the myelin sheath is kind of a little fatty layer that develops over around the neuron fiber so that it doesn't crosstalk to other neurons. And it allows the neuron to go much, much faster. The propagation speed is about 10 times faster once it has the myelin sheath over it. And so the people with misophonia had super fast neurons, and they were pinging back and forth between these three areas. Now, the anterior insula gets external and internal sensation. So it would get your body temperature, internal pain, muscle tension, and it gets sounds and sights and other sensations. Well, if a person has a physical bump to their body, that will be an internal sensation. It's a little bit like getting tasered when they hear the trigger. So there's an internal sensation and an external sensation. It relays out to this structure behind the eyebrow called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, and this is an emotion reflex learning structure. So it takes a neutral stimulus, let's say the smell of grandma's house, and because it's fun at grandma's house and lots of good feelings are at grandma's house, then that smell would then relay back happiness, excitement to the anterior insula, and it would go, okay, happiness and excitement, limbic system, you're the emotional, you actually do the emotion, so I'm going to tell you, let's get some happiness and excitement because we're at grandma's house. And this structure also turns a certain sensation into anger, disgust, etc., which is more the case in misophonia, that the signals come up, relay out, it goes, oh yeah, that's anger and disgust, anger, okay, and then it fires down into the amygdala and hippocampus, and you get the emotional explosion. So these features are seen in people who've developed misophonia, but surely with this strong of a behavior of misophonia, there will be some components in the brain that manifest that. And so this is one. I think that this develops because of the emotions, because of the perpetual use of this. It would naturally develop increased myelination and faster acting signals. So that's my view of it. But it definitely, once this develops, it's an emotional reflex. So the person with misophonia can't just not be angry. And I don't remember where I heard this recently, but I know I've used this with my children when they were mad. And I would say, well, another person can't make you mad unless you let them. That usually anger is a secondary emotion where a person is disappointed and gets angry, they're embarrassed and get angry, they're offended and get angry. So generally, anger is a secondary emotion, but not with misophonia. With misophonia, it's an immediate reflex reaction, and it's not a choice. And one lady, I don't remember her age, but she said, when I was a teenager, my mom and dad had been divorced a number of years, and my mom remarried. And she said, I loved my stepdad. I adored my stepdad. He was one of the best people in my entire life. He was wonderful. And yet he triggered me horribly. And so part of the distress, and if somebody with misophonia wants to speak up with this, but is you have emotions that you would never want to have toward a family member or somebody you're close to. But in that moment, you might want to
Kill them.
yeah, there you go, right? It's
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah.
And so that's extremely distressing for a person with misophonia. And I'm speaking as someone who's never been triggered. So I can't really tell you whether or not what it's like because I've never been triggered. You know. Yes, Julie.
Yeah, I just have a question. You used the word when you were talking about the insula, the part of the brain, the anterior insula. You used this word taser. And that's how I imagine the physical sensation feels to my daughter. It's like, and you said that it's more of that it could be more of a breath response, a tightening around the breath. And yet here's this um, you know, description of a brain response.
Right, because the brain response was measuring the looking at the emotional area specifically. And the other thing to note is that this particular method, so how do you like my trigger and taser? That's one of the graphics I use.
Good.
Okay, so in this this imaging, the sample rate for the imaging is every 3 seconds. So it's only looking at sustained responses, right? And if you look at a muscle reflex, it comes in with your autonomic nervous system. There are pinging back and forth between the cerebellum, which is your muscle cortex, and the insula. And the autonomic nervous system. It actually has some lines that go up into the cerebrum and back down, and then finally the cerebellum fires down into the muscle and fires the muscle. But that muscle reflex we've measured from the start of a trigger stimulus to the visible or measurable motion in the muscles is 200 milliseconds for an auditory trigger. 200 milliseconds. So that's not going to show up on something that's sampling with a 3-second sampling. The other thing that may be different, and I'm not sure how different muscle reflexes are manifested in the cerebellum, but one person, their toes may curl, and another person, their shoulders may go up. And so that may be different areas of the cerebellum activation. And even if you had the high-speed measurement, you might not see it in the overall sample. I do have, you're welcome. I do have a little video here. Julie, have you ever seen the video of the little girl with her feet that move?
No.
Okay, well, I'll show it just for you, Julie. Now, I'm going to warn everyone here that this is going to be a little girl who is going to hear a sniff. So plug your ears. I'm going to actually, let me turn the volume of the sniff way down first. And I'm going to set this volume down to under 6%. Okay, so you'll still be able to hear a little something, and you might want to plug your ears. There's going to be 2 sniffs. Here we go. Now, that's a pretty strong zap to her lower legs. And if she was sitting at a table doing homeschool, she was 8 years old here. She's 20 now. If she's sitting at a table with her brother doing homeschool and her brother is perpetually sniffing, do you think this would start to annoy or irritate her? Well, absolutely. She's being tasered. She is being physically assaulted by her own little lizard brain, her brainstem, her autonomic nervous system. And so this is just one example of how this was just shown to me that it has this physical reflex. And again, Julie, if your daughter's feeling it in the chest,
Yes.
that's usually a more manageable area to work with.
Good.
Okay. The almost impossible areas to work with are things that are not skeletal muscles. Something that's an internal stomach organ clenching, intestines clenching, a sexual response. We can't mentally turn on and turn off a sexual response. That's an autonomic system we don't control. And so those areas are very hard to work with. And so far you can do some management of them, but again, it's much more management rather than treatment to remove the reflexes. So
does somatic awareness, is that a helpful approach after being triggered, trying to figure out what muscles or what area of the body it gets? I mean, it's very hard. I have my wife and my daughter both have misophonia, although my daughter was diagnosed at 18 months with sensory processing disorder. So there's some diagnostic differentiation to go on there. But yeah, it seems like, I'm just wondering if that is something that can be helpful, or is it something that maybe to reflect after the nervous system comes back into regulation?
That is a great question. And the problem is that often the physical bump is trivial compared to the emotional explosion. Okay. And then once the emotions start exploding, then you have this really overall distress response, and people are clenching their fists and they're clenching their shoulders and their heart rate's going up, and the experience is horrible. But the problem is that if you then try to think about where it started, you're clueless. You're absolutely clueless. So I made an app. And let's see if I can get this to show. So the 3 head apps that are showing there, the blue head I did first, which is the Misophonia Trigger Tamer, to make tiny bits of trigger. So while a person's having fun, it will allow the response to decay. Not a big trigger, but tiny triggers. And then I did a subset, and it's an expensive app. It's a $10 app. And then the purple head is a subset of that, which is called the Misophonia Reflex Finder. And it allows you to play a trigger. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to hit. And I'm going to turn my phone volume on maximum. And then the percentage numbers here, I can make this a sound at 0.5% volume. So you can do very, very low volume and 300, 250 milliseconds, just a quarter of a second or a third of a second. And with that little sound, that little bump sound, then they go, oh, I felt something where? I'm not sure. Okay, was it above your waist? Was it below your waist? Where did you feel a little bump? And they go, well, Julie's daughter will probably say, well, I felt something in my chest. And somebody else may say, well, I felt it in the back of my neck or my shoulders or my hands or my upper arms, or literally everywhere. I can't think of a specific place that I know how to name a muscle that a person hasn't reported having their reflex there. So everybody's different, but this is a free app, and it's got a pretty good list of triggers on it. So you can take one of the triggers and play with it on your own before you go in to the person and say, okay, let's try this swallowing or eating popcorn, or one of the ones that's almost universally triggering for people who have chewing triggers is called smack banana. And it's that little clickety click of the lip sound that's very, very triggering. And so, but with that, you can make a very, very small trigger, and the person can usually identify their physical reflex. So then once you've identified that physical reflex, then the key is to relax that, to do the opposite of that. So if it's holding your breath, you want to do continual breathing. If it's tensing your shoulders, you want to relax your shoulders. I use the analogy of playing in the ocean. If you're playing in the waves in the ocean, you can either try to stand your ground and lean into the wave and you know, brace for it and hit it, or you can let the wave pick you up and put you down. Well, usually for triggers, people are leaning into them. They're bracing themselves for the jolt. And when they brace themselves for the jolt, that's tensing those muscles, and then they tense even more. So it's relaxing and carrying on that allows that lizard brain to let it go. So the lizard brain has a 2-second, maybe 2.5-second learning cycle. So once upon a time, Julie, we're going to assume that your daughter is in her chest, okay? Let's just say she's holding her breath. So once upon a time, she heard a sound, and for whatever reason, she thought, they're breaking a rule, they're not doing that right, and she held her breath. So there's a click, you know, click, click, thought, hold my breath, click, click, thought, hold my breath. You do that maybe 5 times, and that lizard brain says, I see a pattern, I can do that for you. So now she hears that click, click, and within 200 milliseconds, those muscles kind of go, and tighten. So that lizard brain has again, a 2-second learning cycle for developing or eliminating the reflex, because it's just trying to follow. So it's click, click, and it hits the muscles, and then it says, oh no, did I do the right thing? Did I do the right thing? And if she tightens those muscles a little bit more, which is a natural reflex to being jabbed, it goes, oh good, I predicted correctly, I will keep doing it. And it can strengthen. It could be click, click, a little bit, tighten, click, click, tighten, a little more, click, click, more, click, click, and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. With the physical reflex gets stronger and stronger and stronger with normal exposure, and the emotions, the emotional reflex gets stronger and stronger and stronger with repeated distress and anger and disgust and all and then the battling that goes on with it, which is very common, where you get arguments and fights and things, especially when the children are younger, and then it just works to build and build and build. But that lizard brain has one agenda, only one: follow you. It doesn't try to create something out of nothing. It doesn't try to keep doing it if it's seen it once, but it's not seeing it now. It follows the person. And there are a few very phenomenal situations that I've had with this lizard brain learning. So this one person had debilitating misophonia, and there's a journal article on this that I published. But she had debilitating misophonia at age 43. She quit her job because she complained to her manager about him clicking his pen, and he clicked it in her face. And she was at a senior staff level scientist. She quit her job and she moved into her parents' basement. For 2 years, she had lived in her parents' basement, virtually isolated from sound. 95% of the time, either headphones if she went out, or not noise or whatever to stop from hearing it if she was in her home. She had a jaw reflex, a very strong clenching of the jaw. She had developed misophonia when she had a broken sternum and was experiencing pain. And so that, pain, the jaw response goes quite nicely with pain. So that was her response, a very strong jaw clench. And she was out 2 or 3 days after our first session, and she and her mother wanted to do something nice for a neighbor, an elderly neighbor, and they were pulling weeds from her garden. I'm assuming it was her flower garden. Maybe it was a vegetable garden, I don't know, from her garden. And school let out, and the kids came home, and they're playing and screeching and screaming, and that's one of her triggers. And she goes like, ah, like 9 out of 10. She said, but I really wanted to do this activity for this nice lady. So she said, I tried to relax. And as soon as I relaxed, I could feel, and again, jaws are easy to relax. We have the neurological ability to relax our jaws. So she said, I felt it ease a little bit. And she said, after 5 minutes, I kept on working. By the way, pulling weeds you have to really focus on what you're doing and wiggle them and pull. And so it's not just grab and jerk, right? It's a focused activity. And so after 5 minutes, she said I was at a 5. After 15 minutes, I was at a 1 or a 2. And at 20 minutes, I was unaware of these kids screaming. So the lizard, now, that is extinguishing the reflex. But there's something called spontaneous recovery, which that immediate experience is more important to the lizard brain than the historical experience. So it's adjusting all the time. But then the next day, that experience of coming down to nothing is in the history mixed with all the other history. And the lizard brain goes, no, I think I'm supposed to jerk those muscles. And so it doesn't hit it as strong the next day, but it hits it, and then it can die out, and then it hits it, and it has to keep recovering and extinguishing and recovering and extinguishing, and then it can eventually go away. So that was one story that was a very quick noticing the extinguishing. When I have a person use the Misophonia Trigger Tamer app, and being able to do it in the real world is better than with the Trigger Tamer because this doesn't have the same context. But with the Trigger Tamer app, one of the things that I have in this app on the help page takes you to a web page, and the rules on this page tell you like what do you do to make it work. And the 4th rule says that in 30 minutes or less, you must see a decay in your trigger's response. And it'll do this if the lizard brain is getting the right experience, but you can't drive that decay. It has to be experiential. But in 30 minutes or less, a person will see that if they're getting a tiny bit of trigger, and they're being engaged in some other activity that they're focusing on, or they're doing steady breathing or whatever, usually just engagement will do it, then you'll notice it starting to come down a little bit. Now, this is not like, oh, I did the trigger tamer for 30 minutes and now I can go eat with my family. Not at all. Not at all. This is just one little tool in what turns out to be a pretty long treatment process that I try to set an expectation with people I work with that we should expect to get 75% reduction in misophonia severity in 6 months. And we meet every week for the first maybe 3 weeks, maybe 4. And then we start maybe go every 2 weeks as they have their exercises and their activities, because I don't do anything with them directly to change their misophonia. I'm a coach and set up activities and things for them to do. And one young lady that I worked with, for her, she had a tongue reflex that when she heard eating sounds or coughing sounds, her tongue would push up against the roof of her mouth. And so her job was to relax her tongue while she watched a movie with her mother while the trigger tamer was playing. And so she would intermittently hear a cough and her tongue would go up, down, tongue right up, down. And the lizard brain would see that and start to back down. So it's it's not the total treatment. I mean, it's not the be all end all. It doesn't work for everyone. And I'm not a psychologist. Dr. Mitchell is a psychologist, so he can work on general anxiety issues along with the misophonia and other things. So I've jabbered on for a while. Does anybody have a question?
I do.
Hi, Marge. Good to see you.
Hi. Okay, this woman that was where her boss or clicked the pen in front of her. Okay, my question is, why did she not go to human resources or something and complain? Or why did she have to quit her job?
Well, from the story I got, I'm going to give you my kind of interpretation. This is what I think I was hearing from her. She had been having trouble with her boss for a long time with misophonia stuff. And she wasn't being accommodated. And she was just financially in a situation and family support in a situation she didn't want to do it anymore. There are people who go to HR and don't get the help they need. It's not uncommon, because the boss will just say, look, I shouldn't have clicked it in her face, but she shouldn't attack me just for doing my work. And you just can't, if you have a person who doesn't want to work with you, HR can't make them work with you. Especially if something like clicking a pen, that's a normal thing. I got my pen out, I clicked it a couple of times to use it. I can't be blamed for doing what's normal. I worked with a man who worked for the U.S. Postal Service. And in the mailroom, once the people found out that whistling triggered him, they would accidentally forget and whistle. And he knew that they weren't accidentally forgetting and whistling. They were just jabbing him because they could. So your question's valid, Marge. People definitely should go to HR. They should definitely request accommodations. But some people just don't accommodate. And some people's misophonia almost can't be accommodated. I worked recently with a woman who has an internal stomach constriction when she hears typing. And she had accommodations, but she was still hearing typing because she had to be in an area where she could have some connections and auditory, awareness. And she found, luckily I was able to give her the idea of using the noise app. White Noise by TM Soft is the one I recommend. There are multiple noise apps, but the ones with these little vertical sound bars, the blue one is $1, the pink one is free. And the pink one is fine. It's got an ad at the bottom of each page. that'd be white noise, light. And one of the sounds is rain on a car roof that is very clicky. So she put on a little, she was allowed to wear the earbuds as long as she could still hear, but she put on the rain in a car roof in her ear, and then she didn't hear the clicking, didn't notice the clicking of the other keyboards, and it's made a huge difference for her. But that was the case even where she had accommodations, they weren't working well for her.
Okay. Yeah, well, I don't know how this would fit in, but I think if, just being able to, like, if people are understanding, I think that makes a really big difference.
Yes,
Like if you don't have to be afraid that somebody's going to do something.
absolutely.
I mean, it helps you to relax. You can relax
Sure.
more.
Yes. And you're all on one team.
Pardon me?
You're all on one team. You're all on the team. Be nice to each other, and let's not make triggers on purpose. And
Right. And I found that, I live in an apartment building, and new tenants moved in upstairs, but before that, the landlady had put in wooden flooring.
okay, that sounds acoustically loud.
And we had lived in this apartment for 30 years there had been carpeting on the floor
Okay.
upstairs. No, then she takes out the carpet and puts wooden flooring in.
Okay.
New tenants moved in like last week,
Yeah.
and we had explained to them, like, like, please use rugs, please put rugs on the floor, please. I said, and besides, I have misophonia, so that please, and
Sure.
they were very understanding and willing to do this. And it just really helped, just the fact that they were cooperative. But however, they have a 25-pound cat who had been in the bedroom above my bedroom. I guess he jumped down onto the floor and made a thud.
Yeah.
And it woke me up at, like, 6 o'clock in the morning or something,
Sure.
which, cats do this. I mean,
That's
but
right.
I had this anger reaction, like, oh my God, they're trying, they said they'd be quiet, but now look at what's happening. They don't care. They're out to get me. And I just had this really big anger response.
Yeah.
I mean, it made me sick, physically sick.
And then how long did you talk about it to yourself? How long did you ruminate over on this event?
Periodically throughout the day.
Right. And every time you thought about it, you felt worse, right?
Yeah. And then it happened again the next day, the next night, like the
Okay.
thud. So finally, my partner and I, we called them up and we said, well, hey, come on, like, like, please, and we thought it was them doing the noise.
Yeah.
They explained that it was the cat.
Yeah.
And that made a big difference too. Like, oh wait, I was all wrong. It was the cat.
Yeah.
Cat didn't know any better.
So
So that really
okay.
helped, just to know that, like, they're not out to get me,
Right,
It was
right.
the
And that's nice that they're kind.
cat.
They're kind and caring and
Pardon me?
understanding. And that's a very good
Yeah,
thing.
and
So
yeah. So I thought that was, I don't know, it was just kind of interesting how, like, I'd go up and down, like, oh, I'm mad now, I'm mad. And then, no, wait, oh, I'm relaxing now because I have more information,
that sounds like misophonia. That's part of the craziness of it. So
the crisis or yeah,
yes.
I mean,
So well, and again, if you can sometimes have some sound in your environment, and my wife has these little breathing noises she makes. That's what I call them. She would call them snoring, loud enough to wake herself up. She'll often wear earplugs to sleep in because that way she doesn't hear me rolling over, me snoring, or her own snoring. And these can be very beneficial for sleep. These are the 3M classic earplugs. You can wear them all day long. People wear these at work. They're a memory foam, and I find I can use them twice and then I have to throw them away. So the other thing is adding some noise. So Mr. Oduin, I don't know how to pronounce your first name, and I'm not going to try it.
It's done. It's done.
It's done.
My name's Kevin Dunn, but that's
Kevin
in Irish.
Okay. So, okay. So a little Gaelic there. Well, I lived in Ireland. I had a child born in Ireland, so it's a great place. I noticed you have a box fan, and a box fan is one of the best, cheapest noise machines you can have for your room. I worked with a young lady who in high school had a box fan, and she would bring her box fan to school with her because she needed that level of noise. And it's a level of noise that's not bothersome to most people. It's usually a very comforting sound. It goes with the nice breeze and everything. So anyway, Kevin, that's a good sign. So you don't happen to be in Ireland, are you? You don't look like you're in Ireland. Your house doesn't look Irish.
No, I'm not. But Marge, I really related a lot to your story because we were actually, in essence, driven out of our last apartment when the carpet was taken, the apartment above, and with flooring put in, and my wife was tormented. I mean, she would be crying, with earplugs in, noise canceling headphones over them, white noise running, but it's this low frequency kind of booming kind of sound. And I've heard, and I don't know if this is correct, but the sensitivity to misophonia to misophonia triggers increases over time the more times that there are triggers.
That's correct. And I've said that earlier in our session today, that the normal experience normal exposure causes the severity to increase because you're giving feedback to that brain stem. It's trigger, bump, and you're angry. And you go, and he goes, okay, next time I'll hit it harder. But I will tell everyone, our group here, a secret, not a secret, but a little treatment. You can use earplugs in the ear, and you can use jawbone or bone conduction headphones that just go to the front, and you play thunder and rain in the jawbone, the bone conduction headphones, and that makes a big difference because now you have that same frequency of sound happening in a good way. So
that's very interesting and helpful. To know that maybe situating those sounds within another context can be helpful because I think that was one thing we didn't try.
Right, because misophonia is a misophonia trigger is a complex stimulus. It's not just the sound. Your wife could have probably heard that sound when she's out on the street and in the grocery store and wherever else, and it not even trigger her. I was working with a woman. We were doing some relaxation practice, and she says, "Oh, just a second. I think there's children playing behind my house." And I said, "Oh, is that triggering you?" She goes, "Oh, yes." So she goes away. She comes back a minute later and says, "Oh, they're doing some repair work. It's not a problem. Let's continue." So when she thought it was children playing, it was a trigger. When she found out it was the exact same sound was adults working, it wasn't a trigger anymore.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. Like Marge was saying, because our upstairs neighbors were not receptive, and we tried going through the management company to help them understand. And it seemed like in my mind, my wife had this narrative of
Yeah.
So that it was a different experience, right? If there could have been more context, more of a dialogue, then maybe it could have been different.
Yeah, and Marge, I'm very impressed that your neighbor was so nice to you. That really was good.
Yeah, right. And also, I'm not sure how to pronounce your first name.
Kevin, just Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin. Yeah.
Okay, but like, see, also there's a legal aspect to this. The new manager of our building didn't seem to like, he's sort of nonchalant about the noise. But then we happen to mention, well, this is a legal issue, This,
Yeah.
Misophonia is in the ADA directory. Then he heard us.
Well, actually, misophonia is not in the ADA directory,
Yeah, that's what I
but
thought.
it qualifies because the ADA does not have any conditions listed in it. There's no diagnoses, no conditions listed. It just has to be a significant impairment on one or more major life domains activities. So
Major
so
what? I didn't understand.
major life one or more major life activities are such as your ability to concentrate or think or move or speak or any impairment, major impairment is what it says. So they specifically have avoided putting any diagnoses in the ADA.
But it's yeah, I mean, I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I work with a lot of disabled and neurodiverse clients, and there's a difference between what the ADA and the spirit of the ADA, and then what practically you can actually get done, which is unfortunate, because businesses are prepared to kind of push back against it or appear to be accommodating, but then not in reality. I found it's quite disappointing. Yeah.
Right, it's tough. It's tough if your person cooperates, then you can get along and you can do a lot. If they're not going to cooperate, it's very difficult, and the legal challenges are really onerous. They're really hard to legally force somebody to comply with Americans with Disabilities Act. It takes time.
It's like a disabled person, can be, they're not supposed to be fired for their disability, right? Because their disability causes, you can't work every day of the week, or some days you have to be out for a few days, and you can't be fired for that. But proving that you were fired for that when they just say that, like, oh, we let you go because we're downsizing, is a lot harder. That's a really big legal hill to climb.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? We've crossed the line here, and we're into past an hour. But anybody have any questions or comments? Our group is kind of small this week, and I'm thinking this is going to be actually the last week for this weekly session until we get into September, and everybody's back at home. And hello, Elizabeth. Good to see you there.
I have a comment to make.
Oh, please.
Because as you might figure out, we're moving actually into an apartment. But so I'm going through all these old papers, and I came across some interesting one. One was from a neighbor downstairs when we lived in New York. And we had not only rug covering the entire apartment, but foam padding below it. But this neighbor would write little notes to us about how we were stomping around in the apartment, which we weren't. We had our noses in books and things. And then I just came across one that was complaining about a fan because yes, I have misophonia, and so I had fans and those box fans like Mr. Kevin does, um, um, and they're very good, very helpful. But she would complain about every little tiny thing that I do not think was coming from our tiny apartment. I think it was coming from somewhere else, but she interpreted as our apartment. And I really tried because I was sympathetic. I'm sensitive to sound myself. But I mean, it was very abusive, her little notes. We finally showed them to the manager, and he absolutely took our side and so forth and so on. But I always had some sympathy for her. Not really. But then I came across a letter which I'd totally forgotten about. It was from our next door neighbors. And they thanked us for writing a letter on their behalf because some other person had been complaining about them. Now, they were a Japanese couple with a lovely little boy and a lovely little schnauzer. And they didn't make a sound. They were just the ideal neighbors. But somebody else was making their life miserable. So,
Complaining about the sounds. Yeah. So,
yeah. And, I couldn't have asked for better neighbors. Yeah,
sometimes in apartments, maybe you can't tell where the sound is coming from.
exactly. And I've done the same thing as other people. I thought I heard, and this was in Houston, I thought I heard music coming from the next apartment. And I went, and then I really made an effort to convince myself that it wasn't their music, but it was the washing machine or something like that, which was my way of trying to cope with it. So, but I really should work with some of those trigger apps to get rid of that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. Any other comments or questions or topics?
Well,
So,
yeah, I would,
yes, Marge.
my hope would be that someday, what?
Keep going.
My hope would be that someday the the building codes would be better so that like when an apartment building is being constructed, they would have to like take into account the acoustic aspects of the apartment,
And
in
Absolutely.
the building.
right,
That
and
they
I
would
don't
have
know
to be
whether,
more careful about the construction.
and I don't know whether there's also some care put in some of the high-rise apartments
Yeah.
that they build it with that in mind as a selling feature, because it costs extra money, and for now there are places who actually want to put up soundproofing between each apartment and make it a quieter option for people. Okay, so I'm going to call this today. We're going to be done for the
Yes.
day, and I'm going to not be here next week. Our numbers have dwindled down. School gets started back up maybe the second week in September or so. We'll start this up again. I'll send out, if you're on the email chain, you will get a notice this week that says there's nothing next week, and I'll give you news as to when we'll start it again. So it's a pleasure being with you. Let's see, let me put up my little end slide here that I've got. Where is my end slide? Should be the last one in my deck here.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was very informative, and I apologize
Thank you.
for running in a little bit late, but I've been following the chain for a little while, and yeah, I will definitely look out for it restarting sometime in September. So thank you.
All right. And Kevin, in mental health work, before we stop here, let me ask, do you deal with a specific population, or are you more general work?
I work in community mental health, so I work generally with people who are on Medicaid and Medicare. But I am a bit of a neurodiversity specialist, so people with like autism and comorbid mental health issues and ADHD. Those are like my specialties. But I work with people pretty much with every diagnosis you could think of.
Okay, and what we find in the research is that misophonia is quite common amongst people with mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
There was there was a study that in a psychological center in Madrid, I think it was in Spain, and they screened for misophonia, and so 2% of the people coming to the center were coming for sound issues. When they screened, they found an additional 33% had significant misophonia. So we're talking about a very common condition, and we're really just learning how to change that and how to make it better. So anyway, this is my contact information. One of my many email addresses. I have more than a dozen, I believe. They all funnel to the same spot. So I get an email that says, "Oh, Tom, is this the right one, or is this the right one, and is this the right one?" And then it comes into 3 different. I get 3 copies of it, but that's okay. Anyway, so we're not going to have this. Whoops, next week. It's TBD, right? TBR, TBD. Okay. And it's not next Saturday. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate you, those who joined us here. I enjoy this. I enjoy talking to misophonia and providing a little bit of help to some people. So it's good to see you all, and we'll see you sometime in September. All right. Take care, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.